My parents made me invisible for 3 months, as part of our family's ghost rotation, where children were erased from existence to learn gratitude. When my 11-year-old sister started her 4th rotation, she left me a note: I won't survive another one, by making us disappear for 3 months at a time. You see, in my family, we had something called the ghost rotation, where kids would vanish from existence for 3 months at a time. Not metaphorically, literally erased. I'm talking about siblings walking through you, parents serving dinner to your empty chair, sleeping in the same room while everyone pretends you're not there. We called it building gratitude, and I honestly thought every family did this until I was 11 and mentioned it during show and tell. The teacher's face went white, but by the next day, she acted like I'd never said anything. Later, I learned her son was doing his rotation too. The schedule was strict. Every child took their turn starting at age 5. You'd get a black envelope with your dates, then on day 1, you stopped existing. The rules were carved into the basement wall. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, no exceptions. Breaking the rules meant joining the ghost immediately. My brother Dale went ghost for 3 months when he was 6 because it was simply his turn. My sister Brandy vanished at age 8 right before her birthday. We celebrated without her while she sat in the corner watching. When your rotation ended, you were grateful, desperate to be seen. We called it being awakened. The family would throw a huge party when you became visible again, showering you with attention. Don't you appreciate being part of the family now? They'd ask. And genuinely, we did. We thought we were ungrateful before, and the isolation taught us our place. I had my first rotation at 5, 3 months of screaming for attention while everyone looked through me. By the end, I was so broken that when Mom finally looked at me again, I cried with joy. The system worked perfectly, or so I believed. But my little sister Cheyenne was fragile. She had severe anxiety that we now know needed treatment. But back then, the family just called her weak. She'd have panic attacks, couldn't handle being ignored, and would hurt herself trying to get attention. At age 7, her first rotation began. Within a week, she'd stopped eating. They still wouldn't look at her. By week 3, she was pulling out her hair in clumps, leaving it on their pillows. By month 2, she'd carved words into her arms. Please see me. Nothing. The rules were absolute. Dad even walked through her once when she collapsed in the doorway, stepping on her hand. She screamed. He didn't flinch. When her rotation ended after 3 months, she didn't celebrate. She just sat there, catatonic. They started her 2nd rotation 6 months later, this time during winter. She spent it sleeping outside, banging on windows while we decorated the Christmas tree inside. I watched her lips turn blue through the glass, her ghost breath fogging up the window. Mom hung ornaments right where Cheyenne's face pressed against the pane. When spring came and she was awakened, she wouldn't speak anymore. The 3rd rotation nearly culled her. She was 9, scheduled for summer. By week 2, she'd hammered cleaning supplies trying to get to the hospital where someone might see her. Even the EMTs were trained to ignore ghost children. Dad was police chief and had connections everywhere. They pumped her stomach while staring at the wall above her head, never once looking down at the 9-year-old fighting for her life. Here's the twisted part. We lived in suburban Connecticut the whole time. PTA meetings, block parties, normal everything. My parents explained that other families were just too lazy to teach real gratitude. Spoiled children become spoiled adults, my mother would say at her book club. The other mothers would nod knowingly. I later found out 3 of them had ghost rotations too. Everything shattered when I was 15, and Cheyenne, now 11, had a complete breakdown at school. Her teacher, Mr. Tucker, found her in the supply closet writing "I exist" hundreds of times on her skin with a marker. He gently asked what was wrong, and Cheyenne, in her broken whisper, told him about the ghosts in her house that nobody can see. Mr. Tucker called CPS immediately. When the social worker arrived, my parents were prepared with their speech. She has psychological issues, they explained. Vivid imagination mixed with anxiety. But the social worker noticed something odd. The other children wouldn't look at Cheyenne at all, even when asked direct questions about their sister. She demanded to see Cheyenne's room. The moment she saw the schedule on the wall, every child's name with 3-month blocks marked ghost rotation going back years, she called for backup. The officers arrived within an hour. They took statements, photos, evidence. It seemed like we were finally free. The social worker promised us we'd never be ghosts again. She said she'd personally make sure of it. She gave us her direct number, told us to call if we needed anything. She seemed genuinely horrified. 3 days later, we were back home. Case closed. The lead investigator's daughter, it turns out, was about to start her first rotation next month. He understood the importance of gratitude. My ghost rotation begins tomorrow. I slipped Cheyenne's anxiety medication into my pocket as the clock ticked toward midnight. She watched from her bed, eyes hollow and unfocused, too broken to speak after everything she'd endured. Her lips moved silently, and I could just make out the words she mouthed: "Please don't go." At exactly 12:01 a.m., my bedroom door opened. Mother entered first, moving with practiced efficiency toward the family photos on my dresser. Father stood in the doorway, blocking any escape route. I grabbed Mother's wrist as she reached for the picture of all 5 of us at the beach last summer, back when we could all be seen. She yanked her arm away violently without looking down at where my hand had been. The words erupted from me before I could stop them. "You promised it would never happen again." My voice cracked as I screamed at them. They both stared through me at the blank wall behind my bed. Mother tilted her head slightly and commented to Father about feeling a strange draft in the room. From across the hall, I saw Cheyenne's hand reach toward me through her open door. Her fingers stretched out desperately before she caught herself and pulled back, remembering the rules. Our parents watched approvingly from my doorway as she demonstrated what they called practicing proper behavior. This was the first time I'd seen Cheyenne enforce the rules on herself, and something inside me shattered. I stood there weighing my options. The front door was 20 feet away. I could run, escape this nightmare, find someone who would listen. But Cheyenne was supposed to start counseling with Mr. Tucker tomorrow. He'd already shown he cared, already tried to help. If I left now, she'd face this alone. I chose to stay. Mother sat at the kitchen table with her laptop while Father made coffee. I watched her fingers fly across the keyboard, composing an email to the school. "Family emergency," she typed. "Visiting a sick relative out of state. Will be gone approximately 3 months." The standard ghost rotation excuse that somehow always worked. The sound of a car in the driveway made me jump. Dale was home from college for the weekend. I positioned myself in the hallway, desperate to see if my older brother would acknowledge me. He walked through the front door carrying his laundry bag, and I stood directly in his path. He walked straight through the space where I stood, not even pausing as he headed to his room. Even siblings who'd aged out of the rotation system maintained the rules absolutely. I followed him to his room, watching as he unpacked. His movements were mechanical, careful. He knew I was there. After his own rotations, after Brandy's, after watching what happened to Cheyenne, he knew exactly what was happening, but he kept his eyes fixed on his clothes, folding each shirt with unnecessary precision. Back in my room, I discovered the new addition. A lock had been installed on the inside of my door, but it was backwards. The mechanism only worked from the outside. During rotation hours, I couldn't leave without someone letting me out. The window had new bars too, painted white to match the trim. From the street, they'd look decorative. Father's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I read the text over his shoulder. Started rotation smoothly? The Millers. He typed back a thumbs up emoji. Another family in the network, confirming their own child had begun their disappearance. I wondered which kid from school I wouldn't see for 3 months, whose empty desk teachers would ignore. At breakfast, Cheyenne sat at the table pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. Her hands shook as she lifted the fork. Suddenly, she dropped it, clutching her chest as her breathing became rapid and shallow. A panic attack. Mother and father exchanged looks across the table. We should increase her medication, Mother said calmly, as if Cheyenne wasn't gasping for air 3 feet away. This attention-seeking behavior is getting worse. Father nodded, making a note in his phone. I'll call Dr. Morrison this afternoon. I knelt beside Cheyenne, wanting desperately to comfort her, but knowing any attempt would make things worse. She rocked back and forth, tears streaming down her face, alone in a room full of family. After breakfast, I found myself drawn to Cheyenne's room. She'd retreated there after the panic attack, curling up on her bed facing the wall. I knew I shouldn't search her space, but something made me check under the loose floorboard where she used to hide candy. Instead of sweets, I found a small journal. The pages were filled with dates, every rotation she'd endured, every day marked with a small X. But it was the note on the inside cover that made my blood run cold. If something happens to me, know that I tried to survive this. The final entry, dated yesterday, simply said, I won't survive another one. I'm trying to understand how this rotation thing works. They physically exist, but everyone pretends they don't. The way the mother hung decorations right where Cheyenne's face was pressed against the window is so strange. The journal was suddenly yanked from my hands. Father stood there, having entered silently. He stared at the wall above my head while calmly taking the evidence of his daughter's desperation. He tucked it into his jacket pocket and left without a word. The house phone rang after lunch. I recognized Mr. Tucker's voice immediately when Mother answered. He was asking about my absence from school, concern clear in his tone. Mother's lie came smoothly, practiced from years of rotations. Oh yes, family emergency. My sister in California had an accident. We had to leave suddenly. I stood beside her screaming that I was right here, that it was all lies, but my voice might as well have been wind. Later, I slipped into Father's study while he was in the garage. His desk calendar lay open, and there it was in his careful handwriting. Cheyenne's name with a date circled in red pen, 2 months from now. Her 4th rotation was already scheduled. The doorbell rang that evening. The Andersons from 2 streets over had come for dinner, bringing their son Marcus. I knew him from school, or I had known him. Now he sat under the dining room table while the adults ate above, discussing property taxes and the new mall being built downtown. Our eyes met briefly under the tablecloth. Ghost children could see each other, but acknowledging that fact would mean joining the rotation immediately. We both looked away. After dinner, I watched Cheyenne try to use her phone to text someone, anyone, but the screen showed a parental control message. Outside communication restricted during family time. Even her lifelines had been cut. The next morning, Mother drove Cheyenne to her pediatrician appointment. I sat in the back seat, invisible, watching Dr. Morrison examine the bruises on Cheyenne's arms from where she'd hurt herself. He prescribed stronger anxiety medication without asking how the bruises got there. As we left, I noticed the photos on his desk. His daughter Emma had been in my grade before she moved away last year. Now I knew she'd just been on rotation. That night, I watched helplessly as Cheyenne took 3 of her new pills instead of 1. I tried to knock them from her hand, but my fingers passed through hers like mist. She swallowed them dry and lay back on her bed, staring at nothing. Brandy arrived home from college the next day. She sat at the kitchen table with our parents, and I stood behind her as she spoke. I'm worried about Cheyenne, she said, her voice steady but her hands clenched in her lap. I only had 1 rotation. It nearly broke me. She's had 3, and she's so much younger, so much more fragile. She paused, then looked directly at where I stood, maintaining the rules but making sure I heard her next words. She won't survive 4. That night, I noticed something I'd overlooked before. The house across the street had security cameras, and one was pointed directly at our front windows. If someone checked that footage during a rotation, they'd see children moving in windows where no children should be. Evidence, hope, but Father had noticed too. I found him the next morning in his study, laptop open, deleting files from a cloud storage account. The file names flashed by. Front window March 2023, MP4. Kitchen view November 2022.mp4. Routine maintenance, erasing any proof that ghost children existed in this house. Dale had been quiet since coming home, but at dinner, he finally spoke up. I've been seeing someone, he said carefully, a therapist, about childhood stuff. The silence that followed was deafening. Mother set down her fork very deliberately. Father's jaw tightened. I see, Mother said finally. And what exactly have you been discussing with this therapist? Just memories, things that happened when we were kids, things that maybe weren't. Dale trailed off as Father leaned forward. Your tuition is due next month, Father said quietly. It would be a shame if we had to reconsider our financial support. Dale's face went pale. I watched him struggle, seeing the war between truth and survival play out in his eyes. He needed that degree. He needed to escape. Maybe I was wrong, he said finally. Maybe the therapist is putting ideas in my head. The next day, the extended family arrived for what they called an intervention. I recognized aunts and uncles who'd grown up in the rotation system themselves. They sat in our living room taking turns explaining to Dale how his false memories were hurting the family. We all went through it, Aunt Patricia said, her voice soothing. And look at us now. We're fine, successful, grateful. Dale sat in the center of their circle, tears streaming down his face. You're right, he finally whispered. I'm sorry. The therapist was wrong. I was wrong. He looked up, and for just a moment, his eyes found mine. The apology there was meant for me, for Cheyenne, for all of us. He'd chosen his college money over the truth. That night, I sat on Cheyenne's floor while she lay in bed. The room was dark, but I could see her lips moving. She was whispering to the empty air, to me. I know you're there, she said, her voice barely audible. I'm going to tell someone at school tomorrow. Mr. Tucker will listen. He has to. My heart sank. Tomorrow was Saturday. I watched Cheyenne's face fall as she realized her mistake about the day. School wouldn't save her tomorrow. The security guard who knew protocol would be there Monday, standing in the doorway until I gave up trying to follow her inside. I'd seen it happen happen with Marcus's sister last year. Mother appeared in Cheyenne's doorway holding a glass of water and 2 pills. She watched Cheyenne swallow them, then checked under her tongue. Satisfied, she left without acknowledging my presence in the corner. The new medication was already making Cheyenne drowsy, her eyelids growing heavy. Sunday morning arrived with Mother announcing a surprise visit to the school. She needed to drop off some paperwork, she explained to Cheyenne, and thought it would be nice if she came along. I climbed into the car, knowing this wasn't about paperwork. At the school, Mr. Tucker's car sat alone in the parking lot. He often came in on weekends to catch up on grading. Mother steered Cheyenne toward his classroom, her hand firm on my sister's shoulder. I followed, dread building with each step. Through the classroom window, I watched Mother pull a folder from her bag. She spread papers across Mr. Tucker's desk, drawings dated months ago, all depicting an imaginary friend, the same imaginary friend who looked exactly like me. Cheyenne's knuckles turned white as she gripped the edge of the desk, forced to confirm that yes, she used to have an imaginary sibling, but she was better now. Mr. Tucker's expression remained neutral as he examined the drawings. He asked Cheyenne directly about her siblings. Mother's grip on her shoulder tightened. Cheyenne's voice came out small and broken as she listed Dale and Brandy, explaining that I was away visiting family, just visiting family, for 3 months. Back home, I found Father in his study, typing rapidly. The screen showed a forum I'd never seen before, maintaining the practice. My blood ran cold as I read over his shoulder. 512 members, active discussions about rotation schedules, dealing with difficult children, and managing outside interference. Father was typing in a thread titled Teacher Concerns, Containment Strategies. The responses came quickly. Parents sharing stories of teachers who'd asked too many questions, social workers who'd been redirected, pediatricians who'd learned to look the other way. One username I recognized, Dr. Morrison, had posted just yesterday about prescribing appropriate medications for anxious children during family transitions. An email notification popped up. The school counselor was writing to express concern about Cheyenne's delusional thinking regarding invisible siblings. She recommended a psychiatric evaluation. Father typed a grateful response, agreeing that professional help was needed. He already had someone in mind. I memorized his password as he typed it, the date of Cheyenne's first rotation, when she'd nearly died. Even their passwords were monuments to their system. Monday arrived with Cheyenne getting ready for school. I tried to follow, but the security guard stood in the doorway as expected, his body blocking the entrance until I retreated. Other students walked past, confused by the delay, but he didn't move until I was back at the sidewalk. Through the window, I watched Cheyenne in Mr. Tucker's classroom. She kept glancing at the door, waiting for me to appear. Mr. Tucker noticed her distraction but said nothing. He'd learned to be careful after yesterday's visit from Mother. The local news that evening featured a segment on entitled Children. The expert they'd interviewed looked familiar. I'd seen her username on the forum. She spoke passionately about the importance of gratitude, about how modern parenting had created a generation of spoiled, demanding children. Parents needed to take back control, she insisted. The old ways worked. Father turned up the volume, nodding along. Mother called Brandy to make sure she was watching at college. Even Dale, back at school, texted that his roommate had sent him the link. The message was spreading. That night, I discovered Father reviewing files in his study, police files. 3 different rotation families had been reported over the past decade. Each case was marked closed, false allegations. The investigating officers' names were all on the forum. The network ran deeper than I'd imagined. I watched him feed the printed pages into the fireplace one by one, evidence disappearing into ash and smoke. The last page showed a photo of a young girl, maybe 10 years old. Resolved was stamped across her face in red ink. The smoke alarm should have gone off with that much smoke, but it remained silent. What makes me wonder is why the security guard knows exactly when to block the door. There's something oddly specific about how he waits until she retreats before letting other students pass through. I climbed onto a chair and pressed the test button repeatedly. Nothing. Father looked up from the fireplace, staring through me at the wall. He mentioned to Mother that the alarm seemed to be malfunctioning. They'd need to look at the wiring. Getting desperate, he muttered under his breath. Good. The lesson works better when they fight it first. Tuesday brought a scheduled appointment with Dr. Chen, the psychiatrist Father had chosen for Cheyenne. I recognized his name from the forum. His twin daughters had done their rotation last summer. I'd seen them at the grocery store afterward, hollow-eyed and silent, clinging to their mother like life rafts. The evaluation was thorough. Dr. Chen asked careful questions about Cheyenne's imaginary friends, her anxiety, her difficulty distinguishing reality from fantasy. Cheyenne tried to stay strong, but the new medication made her thoughts fuzzy. Her answers came out confused, contradictory, exactly what they wanted. By the end, Dr. Chen was recommending intensive treatment, a special facility that understood children like Cheyenne, a place where she could learn to be grateful for reality instead of escaping into fantasy. The earliest opening was next week, right in the middle of my rotation when I couldn't interfere. That evening, Cheyenne snuck into Mother's bathroom. I watched her count out sleeping pills from the bottle, her hands shaking. She tucked them into her pocket and returned to her room. I could only stand there, unable to knock them from her hands, unable to scream for help. The doorbell rang after dinner. Mrs. Patterson from down the street had come for coffee. She mentioned casually that she was starting the rotation with her adopted daughter next month. Natural children understood better, she explained, but her daughter would learn. They always did. Mother offered advice about managing the first few weeks. The key was consistency. No weakness, no exceptions. The Pattersons were new to the practice, but they'd learn. The forum had excellent resources for beginners. I realized then that Cheyenne's appointment tomorrow wasn't just an evaluation. Dr. Chen's facility was where they sent the difficult cases, the ones who couldn't learn gratitude the normal way. His own daughter had spent time there before her second rotation. She'd come back different, compliant. Wednesday morning, I found a note tucked into my pillow. Cheyenne's shaky handwriting. I'll wait until you're back. We'll run together. She'd hidden the sleeping pills again, saving them for when I could run with her. My heart broke at her faith that we could escape this. The breakfast table was tense. Parents discussed logistics for tomorrow's appointment while Cheyenne pushed food around her plate. They'd need to leave early. The facility was a 2-hour drive. They'd already packed her suitcase. It sat by the front door like a threat. I searched the house desperately for something, anything that could help. In the basement, behind old holiday decorations, I found a box of photos. Pictures from before the rotation started. We all looked so different. Happy, normal, before gratitude was carved into our bones. One photo caught my eye. A girl I recognized but couldn't place. Then it hit me. The Hartley girl from elementary school. She'd been in Dale's class. In the photo, she stood between my parents at some neighborhood barbecue, smiling wide. I'd forgotten she existed until now. Back in Father's study, I searched his files more carefully. There, a folder marked HG, resolved. Inside, newspaper clippings about a 9-year-old girl's sudden illness. Unnamed, but the date matched. She'd died during her second rotation, officially from pneumonia. But the forum posts I found later told a different story. She'd refused to learn gratitude. The winter rotation had been extended, and extended, until there was nothing left to teach. Thunder crashed outside as evening approached. The lights flickered, then went out completely. In the darkness, I heard Cheyenne whisper my name, just once. Mother's sharp voice cut through the black, telling her to stop talking to herself, that the imaginary friends needed to stop. By candlelight, Cheyenne showed me something she'd hidden. An old iPod, barely functional, that she'd been using to record our parents when they thought she was asleep. The battery was almost dead, but she'd captured something 2 nights ago. I listened through the tinny speaker as Mother's voice discussed options. If Cheyenne didn't stabilize, if the facility couldn't fix her, they might need a permanent solution. Like the Hartley girl, Father had responded. Sometimes children were too broken to learn gratitude. It was kinder to let them go. The power returned, and Cheyenne quickly hid the iPod, but I'd heard enough. Tomorrow's facility visit wasn't just about treatment, it was about evaluation. If Cheyenne couldn't be fixed, she'd be resolved. Thursday arrived too quickly. Cheyenne sat at breakfast, her orange juice untouched. She looked suspicious of it, and rightfully so. When Mother stepped away to answer the phone, I watched Father slip something into the glass. Cheyenne's own anxiety medication, crushed up to make the transport easier. But Cheyenne was smarter than they knew. She pretended to drink, letting most of it dribble back into the glass when they weren't looking. Still, enough got through. By the time they loaded her into the car, she was drowsy, but not unconscious. I faced an impossible choice. Try to physically interfere with the car, knowing I couldn't actually touch anything, or stay and protect the evidence that might save others. Cheyenne's eyes met mine through the car window, pleading, but I knew what she'd want. She'd left the iPod hidden in my room, battery at 12%. If I didn't come back, make them listen, she'd said. I watched the car disappear down the street, my sister's pale face in the back window until they turned the corner. Then I ran back inside. The iPod was where she'd left it, along with something else. A folded paper with website logins, passwords, everything she'd gathered. Even drowsy and terrified, she'd thought ahead. The house felt different without her, emptier. Dale had texted our parents asking if she was gone, if it was safe to come home. Their response was simple. Yes, come for dinner. We'll explain everything. I spent the afternoon in Father's study, using Cheyenne's notes to access everything I could. The facility's website looked professional, therapeutic, but the back-end files told different stories. Incident reports, restraint injuries, children who'd entered difficult and left either compliant or not at all. The director's bio made me sick. He'd pioneered something called intensive gratitude therapy after his own daughter died during treatment. He'd turned his grief into a mission, saving other families from defiant children. His methods were extreme but effective, the testimonials claimed. By evening, Dale was home. He sat at dinner as our parents explained that Cheyenne was getting the help she needed, that in 3 months she'd come back grateful, or she wouldn't come back at all, though they didn't say that part. Dale nodded along, the good son, the one who'd learned his lesson. I tried Father's GN safe that night, but it was biometric, useless to ghost hands. But I watched when he opened it later, memorizing which files he pulled out. Photos of children, all marked resolved. He was adding Cheyenne's school photo to the collection, preparing for the worst. Friday morning brought terrible news. The local morning show mentioned a tragic accident at a treatment facility, an unnamed minor in critical condition. My parents exchanged worried looks across the breakfast table. Father made a hushed phone call in his study, his voice tense. How bad was it? Could it be contained? Dale must have seen the same news at college. He came home demanding answers, his face pale. They tried to claim it was a different facility, but he'd seen Cheyenne's admission bracelet in Mother's purse. Unit 3, the same unit mentioned in the news report. The doorbell rang before they could respond. Mr. Tucker stood on our porch, his face grim. He demanded to know where Cheyenne was, what they'd done. Father threatened his job, his teaching license, everything he'd worked for. But Mr. Tucker didn't back down. He revealed something that changed everything. He'd been documenting cases for years. Every child who'd suddenly moved away, every family practicing the rotation. He had evidence our parents didn't know existed. State child welfare had been building a case, waiting for the right moment. I realized then why he'd been so careful. He'd been playing a longer game, gathering evidence while maintaining the appearance of compliance. During parent meetings, he'd left recorders running. When parents weren't looking, he'd mouth evidence to the hidden cameras. He'd been fighting the system from the inside. Mr. Tucker's next words made my parents freeze. He'd been working with a state emergency response team. Multiple teachers had filed reports. The pattern was too clear to ignore anymore. And now, with Cheyenne in the hospital, yes, he knew she was there. They had no choice but to act. The facility had called it a treatment incident. The official report claimed Cheyenne had become violent, required restraint. But the injuries didn't match the story. Internal damage beyond what any restraint should cause. She was on a ventilator, fighting for her life, and the medical staff was finally asking questions. My parents' first concern wasn't their daughter dying, it was exposure. Father immediately called their lawyer, discussing damage control while Mr. Tucker watched in disgust. They needed to get ahead of this, manage the narrative, protect the practice. I made a desperate decision. While Father coordinated his cover-up, I grabbed his badge from the counter and hid it in Cheyenne's old backpack. Mr. Tucker dropping that evidence bomb was like watching someone flip a board on a chess game where the parents thought they had checkmate. Turns out he's been playing 3D chess with hidden cameras this whole time. Without it, he couldn't enter the hospital as police. He'd have to go as a regular visitor, subject to the same scrutiny as anyone else. The house had a landline in the basement, an old phone they'd forgotten about. I used Cheyenne's notes to access a burner phone app on the computer, sending Mr. Tucker the location of the badge. He understood immediately. Evidence of police corruption, hidden where they'd never looked. Within hours, everything accelerated. I took a bus to the hospital using emergency cash Cheyenne had hidden for this exact purpose. Mr. Tucker met me there, maintaining protocol in public but sitting exactly 1 seat away, close enough to show support, far enough to follow the rules. The hospital was a maze of white corridors and antiseptic smell. Through a window, I saw her, my baby sister, unconscious on a ventilator, machines keeping her alive. The bruises on her arms weren't from restraints, they were defensive wounds. She'd fought back, and they'd made her pay for it. A nurse whispered something to Mr. Tucker as we passed. She'd been documenting similar cases for months. Her own son had survived a rotation, and she'd become a pediatric nurse to watch for others. The signs were always there if you knew how how to look. Children who flinched when adults looked at them, who went silent for months at a time, who came back different, broken, grateful. My parents arrived with their lawyer just as the state authorities pulled into the parking lot. The lawyer was already spinning stories about medical conditions, pre-existing injuries, anything to deflect blame. But Mr. Tucker had one more card to play. He pulled out a tablet showing years of evidence, death certificates of 3 children from rotation families. All died during treatment or from sudden illness. All had been reported as concerning cases before their deaths. All investigations had been closed by the same network of police, social workers, and medical professionals. The lead investigator from the state team looked familiar. Her daughter attended my school. I'd seen her at assemblies, always watching, always noting which children seemed too quiet, too grateful. She'd been building this case for years, waiting for enough evidence to take down the entire network. My parents tried every defense: traditional parenting autonomy, constitutional privacy rights. Their lawyer cited established family disciplinary precedents, parental sovereignty doctrine, anything to stop the investigation. But the evidence was overwhelming, and now they had a child on life support to prove the system's deadly consequences. The hospital report was damning. Cheyenne had suffered cardiac arrest from a combination of psychiatric substances and physical stress. The substances in her system were at dangerous levels, far more than any doctor had prescribed. She'd been chemically restrained before the physical restraints even began. She survived, but barely. The damage to her heart was permanent. She'd never handle stress normally again, like living as a ghost forever, one doctor muttered, not knowing how accurate that was. The rotation had broken her body just as it had broken her mind. Mother's breakdown came suddenly. Faced with the reality of almost losing Cheyenne, she started talking about her own childhood, her sister who'd refused the rotation, who'd died at 13 from pneumonia one winter, how mother had learned to be grateful after that, learned to enforce the same gratitude on her children. She was saving them from a worse fate, she insisted, teaching them to survive. Dale couldn't hold back anymore. The words poured out of him, witnessing the Hartley girl's death during his rotation, how our parents had made him watch as she grew weaker, as her parents extended her punishment again and again. They'd told him she was ungrateful, that this was what happened to children who didn't learn. He'd been 6 years old, watching a 9-year-old die slowly while everyone pretended she didn't exist. The state emergency response team had heard enough. They'd take custody of all minor children immediately. Other rotation families were being investigated. The network was unraveling, years of careful construction falling apart in hours. Some families tried to claim government overreach. This was a violation of family privacy, of parental rights. But others, seeing the writing on the wall, quietly ended the practice and hoped to avoid scrutiny. The neighborhood watch meetings became tense affairs, former allies now potential witnesses against each other. As they processed my parents, I thought about all the ghost children over the years. How many had there been? How many were still trapped in houses where no one could see them? The investigation would reveal 12 families in the county alone. 8 sets of parents would be arrested. 4 would accept plea deals in exchange for testimony. But all of that would come later. Right now, I sat in a hospital room where my sister was learning to breathe on her own again. The first word she managed when she woke was barely a whisper, but I heard it clearly. Exist. I held her hand as the machines beeped around us. We were both visible now, both seen. It had taken years of invisibility, a near death, and the complete destruction of our family, but we were finally free from the rotations. The healing would take a lifetime. The trauma was carved as deep as those basement rules, but it would begin with this: 2 sisters, visible and acknowledged, existing in the light. I had to testify about all witnessed abuse while my parents watched from the defendant table. I chose to reveal everything, including Dale and Brandy's complicity, showing how victims became enforcers. The judge ordered immediate emergency custody, noting the court chaplain had filed 3 separate concerns about these families. Tucker was granted temporary custody, while other rotation children were placed in protective homes. Local rotation families divided. Some claimed government overreach and violation of family privacy. Others quietly ended the practice, hoping to avoid scrutiny. Neighborhood watch meetings became tense with former allies now potential witnesses. I began helping prosecutors build cases while learning to exist again. I still flinched when people looked directly at me. The investigation revealed 12 families in the county practiced rotation. 8 parents were arrested. 4 accepted plea deals for testimony. Cheyenne woke up 3 days later. Her first word was barely audible but clear: exist. I held her hand as state marshals led our parents away. We were both visible now, both seen for the first time in years. Mr. Tucker worked to place us together while over 200 rotation survivors across the county began a healing process that would take a lifetime, but started with being witnessed. The facility where Cheyenne nearly died was shut down within a week. Dr. Chen lost his license when investigators found records of 17 children who'd entered his program and never returned home. Their parents had been told they'd been transferred to long-term care facilities that didn't exist. Dale returned to college but struggled with guilt over his silence. He switched majors from business to social work, determined to help children trapped in abusive systems. Brandy dropped out entirely, moving in with friends who helped her process years of enforced complicity. The Millers, who'd texted father about their smooth rotation start, were arrested when their daughter was found locked in their basement, severely malnourished after 2 months of isolation. The Andersons tried to flee with Marcus but were caught at the state border. The Pattersons, new to the practice, cooperated fully with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. Dr. Morrison's medical license was suspended pending investigation. 37 prescriptions for dangerous substance combinations in rotation children were traced to him. His own daughter Emma was found living with relatives, having run away during her second rotation. The forum father had used went dark overnight, but investigators had already captured member lists and years of posts. Some users tried claiming it was roleplay, fiction, but the matching dates with missing children reports told the truth. Our old house became evidence. Investigators photographed the basement rules, the backwards locks, the window bars painted white. They found journals from children dating back decades, hidden in walls and under floorboards. Each one documented days of invisibility, desperate attempts to be seen. Mr. Tucker's classroom became an unofficial gathering place for rotation survivors. He kept his door open after school, letting us exist in a space where someone had always seen us. He never pushed anyone to talk, just provided a place to be visible. The state implemented new training for teachers, social workers, and medical professionals. Warning signs that had been ignored for years were now mandatory reporting triggers. Several teachers came forward admitting they'd suspected but been afraid to act. 3 months after the arrest, arrests. I attended my first day at a new school. The counselor knew my history and watched for signs of distress, but I was determined to be normal. When attendance was called, I answered here, with my voice shaking but audible. Cheyenne required ongoing cardiac care. The damage from her final rotation would affect her forever. She attended school remotely at first, too fragile for the stress of in-person classes, but she submitted every assignment, determined to exist academically even if she couldn't physically. Some community members defended the practice even after arrests. They held meetings about parental rights and government interference, but their numbers dwindled as more evidence emerged. More children spoke up. More deaths were connected to the rotations. The investigation expanded to neighboring counties. Cheyenne's first word being exist makes me wonder how long she'd been waiting to say that. Was it planned during her unconscious state, or just the first thought that surfaced? Similar networks were discovered, all connected through online forums and word-of-mouth traditions. What started as 12 families in our county grew to over 100 across the state. I testified in multiple cases, describing the rules, the enforcement, the systematic invisibility. Defense attorneys tried to discredit me as attention-seeking, but the physical evidence supported every claim. The backwards locks, the deleted security footage, the coordinated lies to schools. Cheyenne testified via video link from her hospital bed. She spoke barely above a whisper, but her words carried weight. She described the terror of being unseen, the physical pain of being ignored while injured, the knowledge that another rotation would call her. Our parents were convicted on multiple charges, including child endangerment and conspiracy. Father's position as police chief led to additional corruption charges. They received 15 years each, though they'd be eligible for parole in 7. During sentencing, Mother tried to explain she'd been protecting us. The judge cut her off, stating that making children invisible wasn't protection, but torture. Father said nothing, staring at the wall above our heads out of habit. The house was sold to pay legal fees and settlements. I watched from across the street as new owners removed the basement rules, patched the holes where locks had been, replaced the barred windows. They were erasing the physical evidence, but the memories remained. Other rotation children struggled with visibility. Some couldn't speak in public, trained to be silent. Others couldn't make eye contact, convinced they were still ghosts. Support groups formed, but many dropped out, unable to handle being seen by so many people at once. The anniversary of Cheyenne's cardiac arrest approached. She'd survived a year, defying doctors who'd given her a 20% chance. Her heart was damaged but beating. She existed, visibly and undeniably. I graduated high school in a small ceremony. Mr. Tucker attended, sitting where my parents should have been. When they called my name, I walked across the stage without disappearing. The diploma was tangible proof of existence. Cheyenne started attending school in person for half days. She wore a medical alert bracelet and carried emergency medication, but she was there. When teachers called on her, she answered. When classmates spoke to her, she responded. Every interaction was a victory. Some rotation families appealed their convictions, claiming cultural or religious exemptions. Courts consistently ruled that making children invisible wasn't protected under any freedom. The practice had no historical precedent, no cultural foundation. It was abuse disguised as tradition. I started community college, studying psychology. Understanding why parents would systematically erase their children became my focus. Professors warned about getting too close to personal trauma in academic work, but I needed answers. Dale graduated and began working with at-risk youth. He could spot the signs others missed, the flinch when adults approached, the silence that went too deep. He saved 3 children in his first year by recognizing rotation symptoms. Brandy found her voice through art therapy. She painted invisible children slowly becoming visible, ghosts gaining form. Her work was displayed at the community center, helping people understand what survival looked like. The final rotation family in our county was discovered when a teacher noticed a student's desk had been empty for exactly 3 months. The investigation was swift. The child was found alive but catatonic, unable to process that people could see her again. 2 years after the initial arrests, Cheyenne no longer needed constant cardiac monitoring. She'd never be fully healthy, but she'd adapted. She joined drama club, finding power in being seen on stage, choosing visibility instead of having it forced upon her. I transferred to a 4-year university 3 hours away. The distance felt necessary, but I called Cheyenne every night. We'd talk about visible things, homework, weather, normal life. Neither of us took being heard for granted. Mr. Tucker retired early, exhausted from the legal proceedings and testimony. At his farewell, he spoke about the ghost children he'd tried to see, the ones he'd missed. He'd saved dozens by documenting carefully, but the weight of those he couldn't help was visible in his eyes. The state passed new child welfare laws with mandatory surprise home visits and stricter oversight. They weren't named after us. We'd refused that attention. They were simply called protection standards, boring and bureaucratic and life-saving. Some convicted parents were released early for cooperation. They weren't allowed contact with their children, but I'd see them sometimes at grocery stores or gas stations. They'd stare through me out of habit, and I'd stare back, refusing to disappear. Cheyenne got accepted to art school. Her portfolio included self-portraits from her rotation years, Invisible Girl Made Visible Through Paint. The admissions committee called it powerful. She called it survival. I graduated with a degree in psychology and began working with a nonprofit supporting invisible children, runaways, abuse victims, those erased by different methods. Every child we helped see themselves was a victory against the rotations. The basement rules from our old house ended up in a museum exhibit about hidden abuse. Visitors would read them and ask if they were real. The curator, a rotation survivor herself, would nod and explain that invisible children were everywhere, waiting to be seen. On the 5th anniversary of the arrests, survivors held a visibility gathering. Over 300 people attended, all existing openly. Cheyenne spoke briefly, her voice stronger now though her heart monitor still beeped occasionally. She said trauma carved deep as basement rules never fully healed, but healing began with being witnessed, with existing in light instead of shadow, with refusing to disappear again. I stood beside her as she spoke, both of us visible to hundreds who understood. We'd survived by staying seen, by choosing existence over invisibility, by breaking rules that should never have been written. The rotations had ended, but their effects rippled through generations. Children who'd learned to disappear had to relearn visibility. Parents who'd been erased had to learn to see. Communities that had kept secrets had to face truth. Recovery wasn't a destination, but a daily choice. Every morning we chose to exist. Every interaction was practice being seen. Every word spoken aloud defied years of enforced silence. Cheyenne's heart would always bear scars from her final rotation. My instincts still screamed to hide when too many people looked at me. Dale still apologized for his silence. Brandy still painted ghosts becoming becoming real, but we existed. Visibly, undeniably, permanently. No more rotations, no more ghosts, just people who'd learned the hard way that being seen was both a right and a responsibility. The ghost children were visible now, all of us, finally seen. Thanks for sticking with me through all this. Make sure to like this video to see more of my content.